The Petito versus Laundrie lawsuit will not be thrown out. The judge just ruled that the Laundries' motion to dismiss the Petitos lawsuit is denied. That means the case goes forward. So I'm going to talk to you about the consequences of that decision, what's next, and we're also going to take a look at the decision by the judge because I want you to make your own analysis. So this video is simply my opinion, my analysis. Please do hit that like button. Please leave a comment or a question. I want to know what your analysis is. And thank you to all of those of you who have subscribed. And please do support my work by subscribing. And if you want to contribute to supporting these videos, they're a lot of work. I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. Okay. So, I'm Michelle Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and I'm an attorney. I'm not a Florida attorney, but I've done a lot of legal analysis, a lot of videos on the Petito versus Laundrie lawsuit, which I think are quite interesting. This case presents very interesting questions, just like the upcoming Crumbly case is presenting interesting questions. So, okay, in case you popped onto this channel, the Petito, Gabby Petito, was found dead in the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming in September of 2021. Gabby's parents allege that Brian Laundrie, her boyfriend at the time, killed her, murdered her. And they say that Brian's parents knew because Brian told them. This is what they allege, that the Laundries knew that Gabby was killed. They knew the whereabouts of Gabby. And the Laundries did not tell them where their daughter was, causing them a lot of emotional distress. Therefore, they are suing the Laundries for emotional distress and monetary compensation. Okay? What else happened is that the Laundries' attorney issued a statement, and that statement the judge found was speech. And if you look at the prior video I did on why the judge may not dismiss the Laundrie lawsuit, it's very similar analysis to what the judge found. Okay, so, and I encourage you to go ahead and look at the prior videos I did on the Petito versus Laundrie lawsuit, starting with examining the lawsuit. I mean, why are Gabby's parents suing Brian's parents? Okay, and this is just the initial phase, the motion to dismiss. This is just the very beginning, and the judge has denied the defendants, the Laundries, request to dismiss this lawsuit. And the reasons, I'll show you the reasons why, but initially the Laundries had claimed that they had the constitutional rights, the right, First Amendment right, the right not to speak, not to give information, not to respond to Gabby's parents. They also claimed that they had the Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent, because was there an investigation going on and potentially could the Laundries be charged of anything? They also claimed they had a constitutional right to Sixth Amendment, the right to retain counsel. Yes, they do. This decision is not about anyone losing their constitutional rights. We still have our constitutional rights. But when you speak, issuing a statement through your attorney, that is speech, and you are waiving your First Amendment right, your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And there are consequences. And the consequences for the Laundries at this point are that the lawsuit will not be dismissed and it's going to proceed forward. Okay, so, and there are other consequences I will get to. So again, I encourage you, hit that like button and please do subscribe to this channel and hit the bell notification. And please do leave a comment because I want to know what you think. What are your questions? And by the way, I may do the next video I could answer your questions in that video if you guys want to leave some questions. Okay, so thanks again to all of you who have subscribed. So let's get to what the judge said. What's the judge's analysis? So let me show this to you. And let's take a look. Let me scroll up here. All right, so this was issued this morning at about 8:40 Florida time. And again, I'm not a Florida lawyer, but this video is education and information. So let's go through. What was the judge's reasoning? Why did the judge throw out deny? Why did the judge deny the Laundries' motion to dismiss the lawsuit? So it says right here, today's ruling does not determine what happened to Gabby Petito. The judge isn't saying what happened to Gabby Petito. Instead, today's ruling is technical in nature. It determines only whether Gabby Petito's parents, the plaintiffs, stated a valid claim against Brian Laundrie's parents, the defendants. Did they state a valid claim? The judge said yes, they did. Because the Laundrie statement by their attorney in the context of the unique facts, here's the statement, right? The attorney spoke. That's speech. The Laundrie statement by their attorney in context of the unique facts of this case is objectively outrageous. Therefore, Gabby's parents met the element, which is they had to sufficiently plead sufficient facts to show that the Laundrie's conduct, in this case their statement, was outrageous. The court concludes the plaintiffs have stated causes of action for intentional infliction of emotional distress against the Laundries. The court denies the Laundries' motion to dismiss. That means the case can go forward. Okay? The judge is not throwing out the lawsuit. You can go ahead and read this, and the judge is talking about what the law is. The judge has to assume all well-pled facts are true. In other words, the judge has to assume all the allegations that Gabby's parents alleged in their lawsuit, in the complaint, and you can look at the video I did on examining the Petito versus Laundrie complaint, where I walk you through what it is, all the facts that they allege, that Brian told his parents that he murdered Gabby. And again, this is a terrible tragedy for all involved. It's terrible. But they allege that Brian had told his parents that he murdered Gabby. They allege that the Laundries knew the whereabouts of Gabby. They allege that the Laundries went on vacation when Gabby's parents were frantically trying to get information, and the Laundries didn't talk to them. They allege that Roberta Laundrie, Brian's mom, blocked Nichole Schmidt from Facebook and text messages and didn't answer any of her calls, etc. You can go ahead and take a look at that video, and plus it's in this decision as well. And they say that the court can only consider the facts alleged in the amended complaint. Remember, look at the past videos. The judge makes a decision based only on the four corners of the complaint. What was in there, and was that sufficient to sustain a cause of action for emotional distress? And this judge said, yes, it did. Therefore, the case proceeds. The judge is cautioning the allegations of fact the court will discuss below are simply that, allegations, not proven fact. So the judge is not saying that anything that Gabby's parents allege in that complaint is true. The judge is saying they're just allegations. Whether or not they're true or not, that will be proven later, right? If this case goes to trial, they're going to have to prove these facts to a jury, and it's a civil case, okay? So you can go ahead and read this. In July 2020, Brian and Gabby became engaged. The following year, they left New York in Gabby's van, headed for a trip across the country. Gabby regularly called her family, etc. Brian murdered Gabby. And again, the judge is just saying, I'm assuming that these are facts, these allegations are true. I'm not saying that they're true, but for purposes of a motion to dismiss, judges have to assume that all the allegations are true. Okay, so Brian then texted between his and Gabby's telephone to hide the fact that Gabby was dead. You can read this. Brian told his parents that he murdered, and again, the court is saying the court must assume that this is true for this motion. You can read the rest of this, and then the court says, and fully knowing that Gabby was dead, and knowing the general whereabouts of Gabby's body, the Laundrie's attorney released the following statement, and this is the speech. And that's why the constitutional rights at this point don't apply, because they waive them, because their attorney spoke, according to this decision, on the Laundrie's behalf. So, the statement, which is speech, it is our understanding that a search has been organized for Ms. Petito in or near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming on behalf, remember I pointed this out in the prior video, on behalf of the Laundrie family, meaning Brian's parents, it is our hope that a search for Miss Petito is successful and Miss Petito is reunited with their family. The court basically is saying here, making that statement was outrageous in context of everything that was going on. Gabby's parents were looking for her, and they were, under a tremendous amount of stress, wondering where their daughter was because Brian came back in her van without Gabby. And in the prior video, I pointed out how Gabby's parents' attorney argued in that motion to dismiss that statement gave Gabby's parents false hope that Gabby was still alive. So they did this knowing of Joseph and Nichole's mental suffering, and by advising where Gabby was, they could have prevented the additional mental suffering and anguish of Joseph and Nichole, Gabby's parents, by disclosing what they knew about the well-being and location of Gabby's remains. Yet they repeatedly refused to do so. And they acted with great malice and indifference. Okay, it's one thing if they had said nothing. Then the Constitution, right? Then they could argue the constitutional rights apply. But because this statement is speech, that's where they got into problems, okay? And I think the judge said this, and I think I put it in the last video. The judge asked the Laundrie's attorney, aren't we responsible for our words? And that's exactly what the judge is saying here. So the judge points out a note about legal duty. Did the Laundries have a duty to say anything to the Petitos, to Gabby's parents? They don't have a legal duty. But when they spoke, that's, it's what they said that's the problem. The Laundries framed their silence in constitutional terms, right? The Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the First Amendment. The court does not believe it's necessary or appropriate in this case to resolve these claims, these constitutional claims on a motion to dismiss, right? So the court is not addressing whether or not the constitutional rights are valid at this point, because the court is looking at what was alleged and what was in that statement, which is speech, which doesn't trigger these constitutional rights because they waive them by speaking. Okay, those claims are more appropriately addressed, if at all, at a summary judgment stage. And I'll talk to you about a summary judgment in a second. Plaintiffs, during oral argument, candidly conceded that they struggled with the legal duty owed to the Laundries, blah, blah, blah. And the judge is saying they didn't have a duty to break their silence, but they broke their silence. They did speak. You can go ahead and read the rest of this. If the facts of this case truly were about the silence with no affirmative act, no statement issued by your lawyer, the court would have decided this in the Laundries' favor and thrown out this lawsuit. Had the Laundries truly stayed silent, the court would have granted the motion to dismiss in the Laundries' favor. But they did not stay silent, so they waived the constitutional rights. The Laundries spoke. The Laundries' attorney released a statement that plaintiffs argue was outrageous under the facts of the case. Plaintiffs sufficiently alleged that the Laundries spoke. The Laundries contended at the hearing that there was no allegation in the complaint that their attorneys knew, right? Whether or not the attorney knew that the Laundries knew that Gabby was dead or Gabby's whereabouts. The court said, well, that's not persuasive for 3 reasons. So the allegation that the defendants made, the Laundries made, that what their attorneys knew or didn't know at the time he made the statement, the court said that's meritless. That's a meritless argument. First, because the attorney serves as the agent for the client. He's right on that. Second, all facts and reasonable inferences are construed in favor of the plaintiffs. He's right on that too. A reasonable inference is that the attorney knew that the same information the Laundries knew. I think that's also a reasonable inference. What do you think? Third, The words used in the statement indicated that the Laundries agreed to it. It is on our behalf. It has provided our understanding, and on the behalf of the Laundrie family, it is our hope. Those were the particular words that the judge narrowed in on and said, certainly there is no allegation in the amended complaint that the Laundries disapproved of this statement. For purposes of the motion to dismiss, the court must assume that the Laundries are responsible for authoring that September 14th statement issued by their attorney. Wow. Okay. So, the statement. The Laundries contend that the statement isn't outrageous. They claim, and at the hearing, I think they said that it was generic. The judge said here that they claimed that it was merely a plain statement. But here's what the plaintiffs argued. It gave them false hope that their daughter was still alive. And I think that's when the judge said to the defense counsel, are we responsible for our words? So you can go ahead and read this. These are the elements. And again, the court focuses on element number 2, outrageous conduct. Was that statement outrageous conduct? And the court said it was. And they said context matters. What was going on? You don't just isolate and look at the statement. You look at what was the environment. Gabby's parents were reaching out to the Laundries. They were desperately seeking information on what happened to their daughter. Everybody was looking for Gabby, right? And they issued that statement at that time, which the plaintiffs claim gave them false hope that their daughter was still alive. And it also caused them emotional distress. And in court, of course, the court cites two cases. And again, I went over these in the prior video. One where the insurance company delayed approving a double lung transplant. The court found that given all the circumstances, the condition of the plaintiff, that it was an outrageous conduct by the insurance company, and they stated a cause of action, and they let the case go forward. So the Laundries' conduct alleged here does find support in common F. You can go ahead and read this. It says, was the outrageous character of the conduct may arise from the actor's knowledge, what the Laundries knew, that the Petitos, Gabby's parents, peculiarly susceptible to emotional distress, right? At the time they made this statement. The words used by the Laundries on the surface initially do not suggest outrage. When juxtaposed with other conduct in the case, they went on vacation, they blocked the cell phone, the Facebook, they initially made no comment. When juxtaposed with the other conduct in this case, though, the outrageous threshold is surpassed. It was met. As alleged by the plaintiffs, the Laundries made their statement knowing that Gabby was dead, knowing the location of her body, and knowing her parents were frenetically looking for her. Again, this isn't proven yet, but it's alleged, and that's enough to survive a motion to dismiss. Okay? The court identified 2 additional cases, and I talked about this too. The court says that Florida law recognizes that family members are particularly susceptible to emotional distress around the time of a loved one's death. And they cite those 2 cases that I talked about too. The Thomas case, where the doctors and the nurses concealed how the loved one had died. They said it was a heart attack when in fact it was a lethal overdose. And the court found that that was outrageous conduct by providing false information. And the Williams case, where police officers took photographs of an autopsy, revealed them at a party. There was a lot of jokes, and whether or not that was outrageous, the court said that was outrageous too. And the court addresses there will be no avalanche of litigation based on this decision. That's what the defense is saying, that if the judge does not throw out this case, there will be an avalanche of litigation whenever family members receive bad news. The judge said no, misses its mark. And they talk about a case where the parents were told by a defendant that he sexually abused their daughter. The parents sued the defendant, claiming that caused them emotional distress. They received bad news. The court at that point said no, it was not, there was no intentional or reckless conduct directed towards them. But the court said that we're distinguishing from that case because in the sexual abuse case, there were no facts suggesting that the defendant made those statements directed or made the conduct directed towards the parents. But in this case, they say the plaintiffs alleged that the Laundries issued a public statement of false hope, knowing that Gabby was dead. In other words, it was directed toward the parents. Okay? Even though the media, was directed to the public at large, it was still, their conduct was still directed. The statements they made were still directed towards Gabby's parents. That's what the court is saying here. So, in a parting thought, the judge says, there were additional arguments raised by the defense, but none of them are sufficient to preclude the judge from denying the motion to dismiss at this stage. So it's therefore ordered that the defendant's motion to dismiss is denied, and the defendants have to file an answer on or before July 15th. So the defendants have to respond to each one of those allegations that is alleged in the complaint. That's what the answer is. And guess what else, I think? And here's where I'm going to get to the consequences of this decision and what's next. So again, this is done and ordered by the judge, Hunter Carroll. So what are the consequences and what are the stages going forward? So the Laundries have to answer the complaint. They have to say whether they admit or deny all those allegations in the complaint. And again, go look at the examining the Petito lawsuit and you can look through. They have to, deny or admit that they knew that Brian had murdered Gabby. Did they have her whereabouts? All that stuff. Did they go on vacation? Did they block Nichole Schmidt from getting text? And they also, here's what's really interesting. And I pointed this out way back in that video I did on the judge ordering a hearing on the motion to dismiss, where I went through the case management report that was filed by both parties, and they checked the box about whether there would be additional parties. And this is where I think the Laundries may be suing their attorney by saying that it was his statement. They did not provide him any information. That statement was not made on their behalf. They're going to point the finger potentially, maybe not, at their attorney. What do you think? There could also be other parties, sued. The Laundries could sue their attorney. They could sue other people. They could countersue Gabby's parents. All of that are potential additional claims or additional lawsuits that could happen going forward. Okay, so let me talk to you about what's next. Well, the defendants, like every defendant, have a right to appeal this judge's decision. They can appeal this judge's decision. Will they appeal it? We'll probably find out shortly. Does this decision have any impact on our constitutional rights? No, it doesn't. Okay? It does put everybody on notice, including attorneys, that you're going to be responsible for the words that you say if they allegedly cause emotional distress. Okay? And so, everyone's going to be on notice now. And let me talk to you about the summary judgment that the judge alluded to. The summary judgment is the next opportunity for the defendants to throw out this case, okay? But the summary judgment motion won't be made. Typically, it's not made until after they do discovery. In other words, after they depose the Laundries, after Gabby's parents are also deposed, after they make requests for text messages, any phone records, all of that, right? After they proceed through discovery, then the summary judgment motion, if it's made by Brian's parents, the summary judgment motion will say to the judge, you need to dismiss this case because there's no triable fact. Okay? That's down the road here. All right? So, and the what also potentially could happen here is there could be a settlement, right? There could be a settlement by both parties. They could try to resolve this case. They could settle it, but we'll see. So, question is, what do you think the impact of this decision is? On other cases where parents are being held responsible for not so much Brian's conduct, right? But the information that they had relating to Brian's alleged murder of Gabby Petito. Okay? So it's the statement, it's the speech, it's the words. It's the words that created the potential liability here for emotional distress. All right, let me see if there's anything else. And again, it's a Florida decision. It's a trial court decision. It's not an appellate decision. It's not a Supreme Court decision by the state of Florida, and it's not a U.S. Supreme Court decision. Okay? So, we'll have to see whether there's going to be additional parties, whether the Laundries sue their attorney. And that, if it goes to trial, it's still not an easy case, right? So let's think about if this case goes to trial. And let's say through discovery that the Laundries assert their Fifth Amendment right, which they have a right to do, right? The right to remain silent because the statements that they could give, testimony they could give, could be incriminating. That's the interesting part about this case too. Is if they assert the Fifth and they remain silent, right? And if they assert the Fifth when they take the stand, because the plaintiffs have the right to call the defendants as witnesses in a civil case, if they assert their Fifth Amendment right, well, then what happens? Well, there's a jury instruction in Florida. I do my research. There's a jury instruction in Florida that Gabby's parents' attorney can argue and use that against them. Right? Because if they are, the jury can take a negative inference from a party's silence. In other words, not giving testimony. So that could potentially be used against the Laundries if it does go to trial. But still, this is not an easy case for Gabby's parents. So does this case set precedent? Well, I think it's, for lawyers, law geeks like me, I think it's fascinating because there were some very interesting cases here. And it's not to say, the appellate court, I think it's the appellate court in Florida, the court that reviews this judge's decision, if the Laundries appeal it, that court, has to look and see whether or not this decision is well-founded. In other words, did the judge go outside the lines of law? Did he abuse his discretion? And I don't think the appeal is going to be granted either. I mean, I don't think they're going to win on appeal. I don't think the Laundries will win on appeal. But again, that's just my analysis. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button. Please do subscribe to this channel and support my work. If you want to contribute to making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. So please do leave a comment. I want to know what your analysis is. And hit that like button. And thank you for watching. And thank you for supporting this channel.